cold tone. The week of February 27th to March 5th didn't bring any screaming tabloid scandals, but it acted as a dark mirror to our era, reflecting dense, deeply unsettling signals.
Signals that align along three distinct axes of tension: the fading memory of our intellectual community, the quiet rebuilding of our normative dictionaries, and a brutal looming clash over who ultimately sets the boundaries of human authority.
Before we step fully into that darkness, please take a second to subscribe and leave a thumbs up for this dispatch.
And I'll just add that while this is a channel with a broad reach, we maintain rigorous academic quality here. Every thesis is built on verifiable sources, dates, and facts.
This is SIC News, a weekly dispatch from the world of philosophy. I am Gaia.
And I am Dionysos.
Our mission in this series is to decode dated signals. We take the texts, the institutions, and the conceptual disputes from the past week, and we unpack them to show you exactly how the map of our world is shifting. So, let's unpack this.
Let's start with the first axis.
Right. We are starting with a farewell, which establishes the memory of the philosophical community. The facts are these. On March 2nd, Stanford University announced that the eminent philosopher Dagfinn Føllesdal passed away on March 1st, 2026.
A truly massive figure.
Yeah, he really was. The university's statement highlighted his fundamental work on translation indeterminacy, reference, modality, and phenomenology. He was primarily known as one of the greatest interpreters of Quine, Davidson, and Husserl. So those are the dry facts.
Lower voice, right? But interpretatively, the stakes look like this. We lost something much larger than just an author of important books. We lost what I would call a philosopher bridge.
A bridge between, like, completely different worlds.
Exactly. To understand the gravity of this, you have to look at what the academic world is today. Highly specialized methodologies are literally tearing philosophy apart into completely isolated languages. Analytic philosophers don't read phenomenologists.
They just ignore each other.
They do. And Føllesdal was a rare phenomenon, a vital node in this fracturing network through which the light used to pass.
Wait, let's break that down for the listener, because throwing around terms like analytic and phenomenology can get dense. Yeah. Basically, the analytic tradition is very logic-heavy. It's dominant in the US and UK. Phenomenology is more continental, focusing on subjective, lived human experience. They are like oil and water.
And in a world where these disciplines have turned into closed tribes, his importance wasn't just that he defended one school. He built translations between these warring traditions.
Which is fitting, given his work on Quine's indeterminacy of translation. You know, this idea that there is never a perfect one-to-one translation from one language to another. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, he spent his life trying to translate the untranslatable.
And that leads us to a fundamental question. What actually constitutes a community of memory in philosophy?
It's not just books on a shelf.
No, not at all. Philosophy relies on living, breathing intermediaries, people who hold a shared space open. When that bridge burns, the analytic and continental traditions drift even further apart into the dark. So this farewell reveals just how incredibly fragile our shared space of meaning really is.
It's fascinating how a single human node holds so much of that connective tissue together. But let's move from a disappearing human node to the cold, bureaucratic infrastructure that actually cements these concepts. I'm talking about the big dictionaries.
The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy.
Exactly. So, factually speaking, on February 27th, the SEP published a new entry titled Disability and Well-Being. It clearly moves the concept of disability away from being strictly a medical issue and places it dead center in the philosophy of well-being.
And interpretively, the stakes look like this. We are witnessing a quiet shifting of tectonic plates. The ESSA is not just a database, it is a canon-making institution.
It sets the baseline.
Yes. It's a cold archive that shifts definitions, and with them, the conscience of the institution. These quiet, bureaucratic updates permanently alter the map of the discipline.
I totally agree. And here's where it gets really interesting for you listening. The entry focuses on the clash between intrinsic harm versus socially mediated harm.
A crucial distinction.
It is. Like, intrinsic harm asks, is the suffering coming from the physical condition itself, or is it socially mediated? Meaning, you're only suffering because society refuses to build wheelchair ramps. How do we precisely separate raw suffering from structural discrimination?
Which forces us to reevaluate everything. Normative philosophy is finally stepping away from abstract models of the good life written exclusively for fully able-bodied, independent individuals. By updating the ESSE, The establishment is sending a signal that disability is the ultimate stress test for theories of well-being.
Right, if your philosophy of the good life falls apart the second someone needs help, it's not a very good philosophy. But it's wild how this happens with zero fanfare. A database updates, and the institution just quietly dictates new conceptual rules.
And speaking of how philosophy dictates its own rules, we have to look at the meta level. How does the discipline measure its own legacy?
Yes. This brings us to our third axis, meta-philosophy and the immense power of labels. Let's look at the facts. On March 2nd, Daily News published Eric Schwitzgebel's piece on discussion arcs, tracking how often concepts and names appear in the Philosopher's Index.
Right.
And then on March 3rd, they discussed Galen Strawson's thesis that David Hume was not a Humean.
Thoughtful tone. Interpretively, these two signals expose a deep anxiety about how memory is measured. Let's start with the Schwitzgebel piece. On the surface, it's just scientometrics. Who cites whom?
Just tracking the data.
Exactly. But beneath that lies a brutal question. Are we slowly replacing the living hermeneutic practice of thinking with hard statistical metrics? When a philosopher's influence is reduced to a citation index, the argument becomes a unit of currency in the academic attention economy.
Metrics tend to hollow out the thing they measure. And if we connect this to the Strawson piece about David Hume, we see another mechanism of control, the power of labels.
Labels like Kantianism or Humeanism. They're navigational tools, sure, but they are also ruthless tools of simplification. Strawson reminds us that what we institutionalize as Humeanism would likely have shocked David Hume himself.
The label just detaches from the text.
It starts its own parasitic life.
And why should you care about this? Because this fight over labels dictates who writes the textbooks and who gets the massive research grants. The names of great thinkers are transformed into branded trademarks used to win academic turf wars.
Which brings us to the ultimate turf war. If universities are fighting over concepts, there are far older institutions fighting over the definition of the human being itself.
Segment D takes us into religion, institution, and anthropology. The facts from this week are striking. On March 4th, Pope Leo XIV held a general audience on the Vatican III Constitution Lumen Gentium, discussing the Church as a reality that is simultaneously visible and spiritual.
It was a second document that day.
Right. Also on March 4th, the International Theological Commission released the document Quo Vadis Humanitas. It addresses Christian anthropology in the face of transhumanism and technological acceleration.
Interpretively, the stakes here are profound. We are observing a foundational dispute over the very definition of a person. And to be clear, we maintain strict neutrality here. We are looking at this purely as a philosophical dispute with zero political punditry.
Just analyzing the framework.
Exactly. Silicon Valley and transhumanist movements view the human essentially as an imperfect project. Hardware and software that needs to be optimized and stripped of physical weakness. They define the person through function and self-determination.
But where exactly does the Vatican draw the line between healing someone and treating them like an engineering project?
That is the exact tension the ITC document addresses. According to Quo Vadis Humanitas, the core of a person is relationality and calling. And most radically, it insists on inherent fragility.
Fragility not as a bug, but as a feature.
Precisely. In the theological view, human fragility is the fundamental condition that allows for empathy and interdependence. The moment you try to engineer away the fragility, you are redefining what the entity is.
That contrast is stunning, and it ties into the Pope's audience on Lumen Gentium. By emphasizing the Church as both a visible and spiritual reality, he's defending the idea of the institution as a layered entity.
It acts as a sort of nightlight of the institution.
Yes. In an era where we want to reduce everything to flat power dynamics or biology, this theological language insists that humans cannot be fully reduced to empirical metrics.
It is the institution desperately trying to salvage a rigorous dictionary. A battle over whether we can still defend the human from being reduced to a merely useful tool.
And that leads us perfectly into our final segment, the exact point where these philosophical tensions crash into a hard technological wall.
The technological boundary case.
The facts are that between February 26th and 27th, the AI company Anthropic issued internal statements, and by March 4th, Reuters reported on a massive conflict between Anthropic and the Pentagon. Anthropic refused to lift safeguards that prevent their AI models from being used for mass domestic surveillance and autonomous weapons.
Rapid pace. Interpretively, We are colliding with a terrifyingly urgent conflict between what is legal and what is moral. You have the state saying we need these tools for national security, but stepping onto the stage is a private tech company acting as a fully independent normative actor.
We are looking at a gigantic responsibility gap. You have a private corporation dictating the moral boundaries of war to a sovereign government. Who holds the legitimacy here, the engineers or the democratically elected state?
It's the real-time creation of a new global architecture.
Where private source code holds more weight than a national constitution.
Grimly. Which brings us to the ultimate synthesis of everything we've discussed today.
This week has shown that our most powerful institutions are desperately fighting over who has the right to define human boundaries.
And so the question is, what emerges from this for us? We leave you with 3 unresolved dilemmas to agonize over. Number 1, memory. Will be hermeneutic or purely metric? Number 2, the person. Are we a project of self-creation or defined by relationship and fragility? And number 3, boundaries. Will our limits be drawn by state law, institutional ethics, or technology itself?
Thanks if you made it to the end, sub and like.
Until we hear each other in the next dispatch of SIC.